Let's step into the most unfortunate experience medieval life has to offer. Prison. Not the noble kind of imprisonment where royalty sits in a tower with a view and an almost decent meal. No, you are not royalty. You are trapped, locked in a dungeon, where the walls have absorbed centuries of regret, where the air is thick, and where your fellow prisoners are absolutely not the kind of people you want to make friends with. This will be filthy, ridiculous, painfully unfair, and historically accurate, because medieval dungeons were not just places for punishment. They were places where comfort, hygiene, and common sense went to die. Before we start, make sure to subscribe, because I promise there's no escape from this story. But there is entertainment. And comment below, where are you listening from? And what time is it? Because this is your bedtime history, and nothing lulls you to sleep better than absolute medieval suffering. Let's begin. You wake up, or at least, you think you do. Time doesn't really exist properly here. No sun, no clocks. Just the endless stretch of darkness, interrupted by occasional torchlight, and the distant sound of someone regretting their life choices. Your backache is from the stone beneath you, a medieval mattress alternative that absolutely no one should be sleeping on. And your wrists are sore, not because the chains are tight, but because they were never designed for comfort. The rat scurries past again, pausing briefly as if to judge your circumstances, and honestly, it seems to respect you less than before. You are not a threat to it. You are just another unfortunate soul in this dungeon, and if you die before morning, the rat already knows exactly what to do. Somewhere down the hall, a guard's boots scrape against damp stone. He does not rush, does not look concerned, just moves with the practiced indifference of a man who knows prisoners are scenery, not people. The prisoner beside you coughs. It is a deeply concerning sound, wet, uneven. The kind of cough that suggests he has not seen fresh air in years. You have never seen him. You have only heard him, only known his presence through sounds too quiet to be understood and silences far too long to be comforting. And now, he is silent again. You do not know if that is better or worse. The dungeon carries layers of scent, none of them pleasant. Sweat, damp stone, and something older, something that has soaked into the walls, thickened in the air, settled into the fabric of your very existence here. You have stopped waiting for help. Medieval justice is not about fairness. It is about making sure you regret everything that got you here. The guard pauses. For the first time in longer than you can remember, he looks at you. Something has changed. Something is about to happen. And you already know it won't be good. The guard's gaze lingers for just a second too long, and in that moment, you know, whatever happens next, it will not be pleasant. He doesn't speak right away. Instead, he shifts his weight, tilts his head slightly, as if considering whether you are even worth addressing directly. The flickering torchlight catches on the buckle of his belt, on the sheer boredom in his eyes, on the absolute lack of sympathy in his stance. Then, finally, he speaks. His voice is rough, indifferent, as though he's asking about something as mundane as the weather, and not your rapidly declining future. "You're wanted?" he says. Wanted. For what? You could ask. You want to ask. But something about the way he says it tells you that it doesn't actually matter what the reason is. You do not have a choice in this. You do not get to negotiate. Whatever happens next, it is already decided. And you are simply going along for the ride. He steps forward, unlocking the rusted chains around your wrists with a practiced flick of the key. As though he's done this 1,000 times before. And knowing this dungeon, he probably has. The metal clatters to the ground, the cold weight of it disappearing, leaving behind only the deep ache of confinement. You stretch your fingers, flex your hands, and for the first time in far too long, you move without restriction. It feels almost wrong, like your body doesn't quite remember how freedom is supposed to feel. He doesn't wait for you to recover. He mutters, and you obey because there is no other option. Your legs are stiff, slow, reluctant, but somehow you manage to stand. Your knees protest the movement, sending sharp pains through your joints, reminding you of just how long you have been stuck in that miserable position. The dungeon smells worse outside the cell. You didn't think that was possible, but somehow it is. The scent is thicker here, more concentrated, layered with sweat, old leather, wet stone, and something so deeply unpleasant that even your rat, your silent, smug little rat, chooses to stay behind rather than follow. The guard leads you forward, his grip firm but not cruel. Just efficient, just enough to remind you that escape is not an option, but movement is required. The corridor is lined with other cells, with other unfortunate souls, some silent, some muttering, some watching with eyes that hold no hope, just curiosity, just the faint amusement of someone who knows they are next, who knows the cycle never ends. You keep walking. The air shifts, the walls narrow, a door creaks open, revealing a room lit just a little too brightly. A space that feels strange, like it doesn't belong in this dungeon, like it has been stolen from somewhere far better, far cleaner, far less terrifying. And then you see him. The man who asked for you. The reason you were dragged here. The reason your chains were removed but your freedom was not granted. He smiles. And somehow, that is worse than everything else. The man seated before you should not be smiling. No one in this dungeon should be smiling. Smiles do not belong in places where the air is thick with damp stone and regret, where the walls have absorbed centuries of suffering, where the rats hold more authority than the guards themselves. And yet, here he is, smiling. This is instantly concerning. His robe is a little too clean, his posture a little too relaxed, and the way he studies you, tilts his head slightly, as if assessing a problem rather than a person, makes you wonder if you are about to become something far worse than a prisoner. You've been here a while, he says, as though this is a fact you were unaware of, as though you have somehow forgotten that you have been breathing the same stale air for longer than you can count. You say nothing, because what is there to say? He does not mind the silence. He nods, as if he expected you to say nothing, as if this conversation is happening entirely in his own head, and you are simply present as an accessory. I have a proposition, he continues, and that is the second concerning thing. Medieval propositions are never good. They involve tasks no sane person would take, or deals that somehow end worse than imprisonment, or agreements that only one side actually benefits from. He leans forward, resting his elbows on the desk, still smiling. You work for me now, he says. Not an offer, not a suggestion, just a fact. Delivered with the confidence of a man who has decided this is reality and does not feel the need to ask if you agree. Your throat feels dry, not just from lack of fresh air, but from the realization that somehow, impossibly, your situation has just shifted from imprisoned to unclear, but likely still terrible. You wait. He waits. The guard beside you waits, but with far less interest, because he has already decided he does not care. Then, finally, after just enough silence to make you regret ever existing, the man speaks again. We leave at sunrise. Leave. Why? What is happening? You do not get answers. You do not get clarity. You just get the same faint smile, the same casual tone. The same certainty that whatever happens next, you will not be able to stop it. The guard pulls you backward, guiding you back into the corridor, back toward the cell, back into a space where at least misery was predictable. The door closes behind you. The rat pauses in its nightly routine of judging your existence. Tomorrow, everything will change. And that is worse than anything else. The rat does not seem impressed. You would think that learning about your impending departure, your sudden shift from dungeon prisoner to whatever uncertain fate awaits, would warrant at least a flicker of interest from the little creature that has spent far too long observing you. But no, it simply twitches an ear, shifts slightly, and continues whatever questionable activities rats do in medieval dungeons when no one is watching. You, on the other hand, are far less at peace. The cell feels different now, heavier, no longer just a space to suffer in, but a space to wait in. Sunrise. That is when everything changes. And so, you wait. The walls do not care. They have seen prisoners come and go, watched people lose their minds to the endless passage of time, witnessed the slow unraveling of hope, the quiet acceptance of fate, the brief moments of rebellion before reality crushed them again. You shift against the cold stone floor, trying to find some fraction of comfort, some position that does not remind you that you have been sitting in filth longer than is reasonable for any living creature. Sleep should come, but your mind will not allow it, because what exactly does leaving mean? Execution, public humiliation, a sudden opportunity to become the king's personal footstool. None of the options sound particularly great. The man with the infuriatingly casual smile did not explain. He simply spoke, as if decisions were not meant to be questioned, as if certainty itself was an acceptable replacement for details. The air grows stale, thick with the weight of time pressing down on you. Your eyes close. Sleep finally arrives, not gently, but with the full weight of exhaustion dragging you under. You dream, not of escape, not of freedom, but of medieval bread that doesn't taste like regret, and a mattress that does not actively try to ruin your spine. Then, movement, boots against stone, keys jingling. The door creaks open. Sunrise has come, and you are out of time. The guard does not hesitate. He grips your arm, firm but not violent. A gesture not of cruelty, but of pure efficiency. Because this is routine for him, but for you? For you? This is the moment everything shifts. You step forward, your legs stiff, reluctant, your body still adjusting to the idea that movement is happening again. That the cell, the space that had become your miserable home, is no longer where you belong. The corridor is just as damp as before. The scent of old stone, sweat, and regret clinging to the air, like it has no intention of leaving. The other prisoners watch, not with sympathy, not with concern, but with detached curiosity, as though your departure is just another piece of entertainment in an endless stretch of suffering. A door creaks open. The same room as before, the same infuriatingly clean, robed man seated at the desk, the same faint smile that somehow makes everything worse. You wait. He waits. The guard does not wait. He simply exists, standing there, uninterested, just another piece of medieval reality that refuses to explain itself. Then, finally, the man speaks. "It's time," he says. "This is not the clarification you needed. You do not ask questions, because in medieval life, asking questions does not bring answers. It brings consequences." He stands, adjusting the sleeves of his robe, like a man who is thoroughly pleased with whatever nonsense he is about to do. "We ride at once," he adds. And before you can process what that actually means, the guard pulls you toward the exit, toward a doorway that does not lead to another cell, but to the world outside. Sunlight hits your face. It is blinding. And for the first time in longer than you can remember, you feel the warmth of the sun. The sharp contrast of fresh air battling against the memory of damp dungeon walls. The realization that whatever happens next, you are no longer a prisoner. You are something else. Something worse. The sun hits differently when you haven't seen it in months. It isn't just light. It's an assault. A sudden brightness that makes you wonder if the dungeon was actually doing you a favor. You squint, adjusting to the warmth, to the fresh air that feels downright suspicious after breathing damp stone for so long, to the strange realization that you are no longer surrounded by walls meant to contain you. And yet, you do not feel free, because medieval life does not work like that. The robed man is already beside a horse, adjusting his saddle, moving with the kind of calm authority that says he knows exactly where this is going. But you absolutely do not. He glances at you only briefly, as if checking to make sure you have not fled yet. And honestly, the idea is tempting. Except there is a guard standing directly beside you, and the reality of medieval consequences means running would not end well. Get on, the man says. He does not explain where you are going. He does not explain what happens next. He simply expects obedience. And you, having absolutely no other viable option, comply. The horse does not seem thrilled about this arrangement. It huffs, shifts slightly, as if aware that this entire situation is riddled with questionable decisions. And then, you ride. Away from the dungeon. Away from the misery you at least understood. Away from certainty, and into whatever fresh disaster awaits. And somehow, that is worse. The sunlight is too much. Your eyes burn, your skin aches, and for a moment, the outside world feels wrong, like it should not exist. Like the dungeon was the only reality that mattered. The guard does not wait for you to adjust. He moves you forward, his grip steady, his pace unbothered, leading you toward a horse waiting nearby. A creature that looks almost as unimpressed as the rat. The man in the clean robe follows, stepping into the daylight without hesitation, like a man who knows he belongs out here. Unlike you, who now feels like an intruder in fresh air. He mounts his own horse with ease, adjusting his robes as if he is preparing for something important, as if this moment carries some weight that only he understands. You are helped onto the other horse, your body protesting the movement, your muscles still remembering the weeks, months, of being barely allowed to shift inside the dungeon. The horse snorts, shifting slightly, as though it too is questioning why exactly you are here. You do not get answers. The man glances back once, eyes sharp, smile still faint, still infuriatingly unreadable. Then, he moves forward, and you follow. The town beyond the dungeon gates is loud, alive, far too normal. People walk past you without interest, as though they do not realize a prisoner, someone who should not be riding freely, is moving through their streets. You take in the sounds, the smells, the movement, the sheer, overwhelming contrast of a place that breathes life when you have spent too long trapped in a place that only held decay. The man does not speak. Not yet. And somehow, that is worse than anything else. Because whatever this is, it is only beginning. The horse does not seem thrilled about carrying a prisoner of questionable value, a man who absolutely does not know how to ride properly, and whatever terrible decisions led to this moment. It huffs, shifts, probably regretting its own life choices, but begrudgingly accepts that this is happening. You try to sit like someone who belongs here, but medieval horseback travel is less graceful night, and more hold on and hope for the best. The robed man does not struggle. He sits perfectly, moves perfectly, somehow maintaining the infuriating air of someone who knows things, but refuses to share them. You do not know where you are going, but you do know the horse is moving too quickly for you to object properly. And every bump in the road reminds you that dungeons, despite their drawbacks, did not require balancing on a rapidly moving animal. The countryside stretches in all directions, a vast medieval landscape full of fresh air and suspicious choices. You could ask where you are going, but again, medieval life does not reward curiosity. It punishes it. The man glances at you, just briefly, just enough to make you uncomfortable. Then, finally, he speaks. "You'll do well," he says. Do well at what? Do well why? What is happening? And why does the horse seem to understand more than you do? You do not get answers. You just keep riding, destination unknown, fate uncertain, medieval life unfolding like a series of poor decisions, wrapped in vague smiles. The horse continues forward, completely indifferent to your ongoing confusion, lingering fear, and rapidly declining sense of control over your own fate. The robed man rides with perfect confidence, as though this journey is nothing more than a casual outing, as though he has not just dragged a dungeon-weary prisoner into whatever questionable medieval nonsense he has planned. The countryside stretches on, rolling hills, distant villages, winding dirt paths that all seem to lead towards some unknown destination. You do not ask where you are going, because there is no point in asking. Medieval life does not reward curiosity. It punishes it. Time moves strangely in travel. You are unsure how long you have been riding, unsure if the ache in your legs is from lack of movement in the dungeon, or too much movement now. Then, finally, something changes. A town appears on the horizon, smoke curling lazily from chimneys, carts rattling across stone roads, people moving with the kind of medieval determination that suggests their day is about to be completely ruined. The man does not announce your arrival. He simply rides forward, guiding the horse with the quiet arrogance of someone who knows exactly where he belongs. You do not know where you belong, but you are quite certain it is not here. And yet, here you are. The town feels old, lived in, coated in layers of history that have not been properly washed. The streets smell vaguely of livestock, bread, and regret. You barely have time to process this before the robed man pulls his horse to a stop in front of a building that absolutely does not look welcoming. He dismounts effortlessly. You do not. Because medieval horse dismounting is a skill no one teaches prisoners before dragging them into strange, mysterious tasks. The guard remains behind. Your only remaining link to the life of dungeon-based suffering you at least understood. The robed man turns to you, nodding like a man who is far too pleased with himself. And then, finally, he speaks. You start today? Start what? Start where? Start why? None of those questions will be answered, because you are already stepping forward. And somehow, this feels worse than the dungeon. The robed man does not wait for your confusion to settle. He steps inside the building, moving with the quiet certainty of a man who knows this situation is ridiculous, but refuses to acknowledge it. You hesitate, because whatever happens past this doorway will absolutely not be good. The guard, your last connection to dungeon-based misery, remains outside, standing there with the kind of expression that says, he is relieved this is not his problem anymore. You step forward anyway, because what choice do you really have? The room inside is not what you expected. For one, it doesn't smell like failure. For another, people are already here, standing, waiting, watching you like they absolutely know something you do not. The robed man gestures vaguely toward them, as if introducing you to a group you absolutely did not ask to be introduced to. This is yours now, he says. Yours what? What is happening? One of the people, a woman with the kind of sharp gaze that suggests she has already decided you are a disappointment, crosses her arms. He doesn't look useful, she mutters. This is not incorrect. But you are now apparently part of this, whatever this is. The robed man still refuses to explain anything, and at this point, you are starting to suspect that medieval life just operates entirely on vague statements and blind obedience. The woman who already does not believe in your usefulness sighs, shaking her head, as though your mere presence has lowered the entire quality of the room. You're supposed to help, she says, like that clarifies anything. Help with what? Help how? Help why? The robed man finally turns back to you, gesturing toward what is definitely a workstation of some kind. But for what purpose? You have absolutely no idea. You work here now, he says. This is not a job interview. This is not a career choice. This is medieval employment, which means nobody asks if you are qualified. They just assume you'll figure it out before dying. You glance at the tools laid out on the wooden table, objects that could either be meant for crafting or for making people deeply uncomfortable. It is honestly unclear. The woman crosses her arms. We don't have time to train you, she mutters. Great, fantastic. So not only do you not know what this is, but apparently you're supposed to already be good at it. The robed man claps his hands together, clearly pleased with how your suffering is unfolding. You'll do fine, he says. And somehow that is worse. Oh, trust me, I haven't forgotten. You started as a prisoner, and now, somehow you are expected to be a functioning medieval worker, despite absolutely none of the necessary training, context, or willingness. The robed man still refuses to elaborate, still carries the smug satisfaction of someone who knows more than everyone else, but refuses to say anything. The woman sighs, shaking her head again, visibly disappointed in your continued existence. You'll figure it out, she mutters, gesturing vaguely toward the workstation, as if your entire skill set should just appear out of sheer necessity. You glance at the tools. They are sharp, slightly rusted, definitely not safe, and absolutely not things you have ever handled before. Your hands still ache from the chains. Still remember the weight of confinement. Still do not fully trust the freedom they have been given. You're already behind, she adds. Behind on what? Behind why? What is happening? The robed man pats your shoulder, a gesture that is meant to be reassuring, but is deeply upsetting instead. You'll do fine, he says. No explanation, no further instructions. Just an overwhelming confidence in the fact that medieval survival is purely based on guessing. Until you get it right. You pick up one of the tools, cautiously, uncertainly, because if you hesitate too long, someone is going to decide you are a waste of space, and you do not want to find out what happens to medieval employees who underperform. Your fingers wrap around the handle. It is heavy, foreign, uncomfortably familiar in a way that suggests it has been used extensively by someone who knew what they were doing. Unlike you. The woman watches. The robed man watches. The town outside continues on as if none of this matters, as if your life has not just taken another strange turn, as if your fate is not entirely out of your control now. You take a breath. You try to figure out what exactly you are supposed to be doing. The silence in the room is deeply unsettling. Not the kind of silence that suggests peace or quiet reflection, but the kind of silence that happens right before something goes terribly wrong. The robed man still refuses to explain anything, just stands there with the quiet arrogance of someone who has thrown a prisoner into a mysterious medieval task and expects them to figure it out without help. The woman sighs again, louder this time, as if she wants the entire universe to know that she regrets your presence. "You don't even know what this is, do you?" she says. No, you absolutely do not. But you do know that admitting this out loud would not end well. She shakes her head, muttering something under her breath that probably isn't complimentary. Then, finally, mercifully, she gestures toward the tools, toward the mess of supplies on the table, toward whatever medieval nonsense you are now responsible for. "You're supposed to prepare the materials," she says. "Materials for what? Materials why? You do not get answers. You just get judgment." The robed man watches, clearly entertained by your suffering. The room feels smaller than before, heavier, filled with the overwhelming pressure of learning something you should already know. And you pick up a tool, grip it like you belong here, and try to pretend this is normal. Even though none of this is normal. You try to understand the task. But medieval employment is not based on logic. It is based on blind compliance and a deeply concerning lack of training. The woman watches you with the full force of her disappointment. The kind of stare that says, "I already know you are going to mess this up." You pick up a tool. It is heavier than you expected, slightly rusted, and absolutely not designed for comfort. You glance at the materials. They are messy, unclear, probably important but entirely mysterious. "You have one job," she mutters. "Great. Fantastic. One job, no instructions, no context. Just medieval suffering." You grip the tool. You begin. You immediately regret everything. Because whatever you were supposed to do, you are absolutely doing it incorrectly. The woman makes a noise, somewhere between frustration and resignation. "You're worse than the last one," she mutters. "The last one? Where is the last one? What happened to the last one?" You do not ask, because you do not want to know. The robed man still looks vaguely entertained. And then, before your failure can fully settle into disaster, the door bursts open. A guard stands there. Not your previous guard, the dungeon one, but another one. And he does not look amused. "You're coming back," he announces. "Back? Back where? Back why?" You do not get answers. You just get grabbed. And suddenly, you are no longer a questionable medieval worker. You are a prisoner again. Back into the dungeon, back into the cold air, back into the familiar misery of medieval confinement. And somehow, this is still worse. Back in the dungeon, the air feels heavier, as if it's personally offended by your brief moment of near freedom. The stone has not changed. Still cold, still damp, still absolutely unforgiving. The rat has not changed either. It glances at you with mild disdain, as if you have returned in disgrace, having failed to live up to whatever questionable standards it holds. The scent in the cell is not just bad. It's historical. Layers of filth, soaked into the walls, settled into the straw, fused with the very essence of the dungeon itself. It's the kind of smell that doesn't just exist, it thrives. Your hands rest against the ground, rough, uneven. A reminder that comfort is not part of the prison experience. There is no bed. There is straw, theoretically meant for sleeping, practically meant for holding on to whatever unknown horrors have lived in it before you arrived. The meals. Questionable at best, deeply concerning at worst. Sometimes it's a slab of bread, hard enough that the rat pauses to consider if it's worth stealing. Sometimes it's a bowl of something vaguely food, shaped, something that probably started as a vegetable, but lost its original identity somewhere along the way. The water. Less a refreshing drink and more an ongoing gamble. You could drink it. You could also die. Medieval hygiene does not exist here, or rather, it does exist, but only in the form of deeply flawed logic. Bathing. Considered suspicious. Washing your hands. Only if you want people to question what's wrong with you. Your clothes carry the full weight of your suffering, absorbing sweat, dust, and whatever strange particles float through the dungeon air. And somehow, this is normal. This is just life. This is just medieval prison. And no one is trying to change it. Because why change something when you can simply endure it? Your rat roommate is still here, still thriving, still judging your life choices. You are still here, still suffering, still wondering how medieval justice decided you were worth this much misery. But today things get stupid. Because medieval prison is not just about surviving. It's about surviving with absolutely no dignity whatsoever. Your morning routine consists of waking up to the sound of someone screaming in the distance, which is honestly just another Tuesday in dungeon life. Your breakfast arrives in the form of a bowl of something so questionable that even your rat refuses to touch it. The guard tosses it in without looking, because food delivery is more of a punishment than a service here. The tasty despair, the texture, unidentified sludge. You eat it anyway, because starvation is not a better option. Meanwhile, your cell neighbor has taken up medieval poetry, which consists mostly of rhyming words about rats, despair, and whatever horrible decision led him here. It's bad poetry, but it's consistent. And consistency is rare in a place where hygiene, logic, and basic respect do not exist. A guard strolls past, pauses briefly to glance at you, then shakes his head slowly, as if disappointed that you are still alive. You nod politely, because honestly, fair enough. By midday, a fellow prisoner has attempted to convince everyone that he is a lost royal, and honestly, even the rat doesn't believe him. The guards let him continue his delusions, because they find entertainment wherever they can, and failed prince in a dungeon is prime material. You learn new survival tricks, like how to sleep without actually touching the straw, and how to stare at the wall intensely enough to pretend you're not in a dungeon. Your rat roommate steals a piece of your bread, and you let him, because honestly, he deserves it more than you do at this point. By nightfall, the dungeon is filled with conflicting sounds. Someone crying, someone laughing too hard at something unfunny, someone attempting to plot an escape using a spoon and pure optimism. Escape is not happening. Sanity is questionable, and medieval prison. Just another day of absolutely unnecessary suffering. The dungeon never truly quiets down, but tonight, it's particularly ridiculous. Your cell neighbor has decided he's a visionary, claiming he can interpret the future based on how the rats move. The rat pauses mid-step, looks at you, then moves the other way. See? Your neighbor whispers. You do not see. Meanwhile, another prisoner has taken up medieval singing, which is less music and more an aggressive test of lung capacity. The guard passes by, stops briefly, then shakes his head like he regrets every decision that led him to working here. You nod politely, because honestly, fair reaction. Dinner arrives in the usual fashion, thrown into the cell like it's part of a punishment rather than a meal. The rat gets to it first, claiming dominance over the entire bowl with one swift movement. You let him have it, because at this point, he has earned it more than you have. By midnight, someone is attempting to escape using nothing but a loose brick and pure optimism. It does not work, but at least he tried. Another day of medieval prison nonsense, another night of questionable decisions, and another deeply concerning realization that none of this is getting better anytime soon. The dungeon does not reward intelligence, nor does it encourage rational thinking, which explains why, at this exact moment, your cell neighbor has decided that if he screams loudly enough, the walls will simply give up and fall over. You watch. The walls do not fall over. They do exactly what medieval walls do best: continue existing in the worst possible way. Meanwhile, the rat has claimed an entire corner of the cell as his personal domain, staring at you like you are the trespasser, not him. You do not argue with him, because honestly, he might be right. The food arrives, thrown into the cell as always, hitting the ground with a kind of impact that suggests it is barely edible. You pick it up. It has the density of a brick, the scent of deep regret, and the general shape of something that probably started as food, but lost its way somewhere in the process. You eat it anyway, because medieval prison is not about enjoying meals. It is about enduring them. The guard pauses outside your cell, gives you a long, disappointed stare, then shakes his head like you have personally ruined his evening, just by existing. You nod, because he is absolutely right. Another night of medieval nonsense. Another day where the walls do not collapse. Another deeply concerning realization that this will continue indefinitely. Because medieval prison is not just bad, it is relentless. And somehow, this is normal now. The dungeon is a place where logic has long since given up and gone somewhere else. At this very moment, your cell neighbor is deep in an argument with a rat, claiming it has disrespected him by taking food without asking. The rat does not look apologetic. In fact, it looks deeply unimpressed, twitching its whiskers like it has far more important things to do than entertain such accusations. Your neighbor crosses his arms. "If I were free," he mutters, "I'd teach it manners." You are quite certain he would not. Meanwhile, across the dungeon, someone has decided that if you talk fast enough, it counts as reading a book. You are not sure why this is happening. But at this point, nothing surprises you anymore. The guard arrives with your daily disappointment, which technically counts as food, but spiritually counts as a punishment. He throws it into the cell, not bothering to check if it lands in the straw, the dirt, or directly into the rat's waiting claws. You sigh. The rat eats first. The guard stares at you, sighs again, then shakes his head like your existence alone has ruined his day. You nod politely, because honestly, fair enough. Somewhere in the back, a prisoner has decided he is the king now. Nobody argues, because honestly, why not? Another day of medieval nonsense. Another evening of deeply questionable survival choices. Another night of rats, regret, and ridiculous decisions. Because medieval prison is not just terrible, it's absurd. And somehow, you are starting to adapt. The dungeon has reached new levels of absurdity, and somehow, you are fully participating now. Your cell neighbor is still furious at the rat, claiming it has insulted his honor. The rat does not care. Meanwhile, across the way, another prisoner has decided that if he speaks in a serious enough tone, whatever nonsense he says will sound wise. Life, he declares dramatically, is just a series of unfortunate meals. You nod, because he is absolutely correct. The daily food disaster arrives, and as always, the guard does not bother with accuracy. The bowl lands with a splash, sloshing its contents into the straw, onto your leg, and directly into the rat's reach. The rat does not hesitate. You sigh. The prisoner next to you sighs too, in a synchronized expression of medieval suffering. Your cell neighbor suddenly announces that he is starting a business. What kind of business? You ask, instantly regretting the decision to ask. Brick distribution, he replies. There is only one loose brick in the entire dungeon. And yet, somehow, he He is already making marketing plans. The guard passes by, witnesses this, closes his eyes briefly, like he wishes he had chosen another career, then continues on without comment. Another day of unnecessary nonsense. Another night of deeply regrettable conversations. Another moment of wondering how medieval life ended up like this. Because medieval prison is not just about survival. It is about embracing the full force of ridiculousness. And somehow, you are getting really good at it. The dungeon is officially at peak nonsense, and somehow, you have completely stopped resisting the chaos. Your cell neighbor is still managing his brick distribution business, despite the fact that he only has one brick, and nobody actually wants it. Meanwhile, another prisoner has decided he is in charge of education, loudly explaining medieval science in a way that is absolutely incorrect but deeply passionate. The sun moves because of angry spirits, he declares. You nod, because honestly, that explanation makes about as much sense as anything else here. The guard arrives with your daily disappointment, which hits the floor with a distinct, "This is not edible" thud. The rat steals most of it before you can react. You sigh. Your cell neighbor sighs. The guard sighs. The rat does not sigh, because it is winning. By midday, someone is attempting to teach the rats military strategy, claiming that if they form an organized rebellion, they can take control of the dungeon. The rats do not look interested. You watch anyway, because honestly, if they succeed, you need to be on their side. Another day of medieval nonsense. Another night of deeply regrettable survival tactics. Another moment of realizing that nothing in history makes sense. Because medieval prison is not just bad. It's aggressively ridiculous. And somehow, you wouldn't change a thing. The dungeon has officially embraced its fate as a medieval comedy club. And somehow, you are right in the middle of it. Your cell neighbor is still passionately managing his brick distribution empire, despite the fact that he has no customers and the rat is his only employee. Across the way, another prisoner has launched a new business venture, medieval consulting. If you need life advice, he says, just scream at the walls. They listen. You nod, because honestly, that sounds like medieval therapy. The daily food disaster arrives, and for the first time, it actually lands somewhat correctly, only slightly covered in dirt and existential regret. The rat stares at it, considering its options, then graciously allows you to eat first. You nod in appreciation. Because this is the closest thing to respect you will ever receive in this dungeon. Meanwhile, someone has decided to practice medieval diplomacy, attempting to negotiate better treatment with the guard, using only vague promises and a rock. The guard stares at him for a long moment, then walks away without saying a word. Negotiations have failed. By nightfall, someone is drafting a new set of dungeon rules, consisting mostly of don't steal from the rat, don't trust anyone who says they're the lost heir to a kingdom, and don't eat anything that moves before you touch it. You agree wholeheartedly. Another day of medieval nonsense. Another night of deeply questionable decisions. Another moment of accepting that this is just life now. Because medieval prison is not just terrible, it's an unstoppable force of bad ideas. And somehow, you're making it work. The dungeon continues its reign of medieval ridiculousness. But now, let's add some deeply unfortunate historical accuracy to the mix. Because let's face it, medieval prisons were absolutely awful, but in ways you probably hadn't considered yet. Hygiene, absolutely non-existent. The idea of regular bathing was suspicious in medieval times. People believed that too much washing would weaken the body, which means that most prisoners were genuinely unwashed. not just because of their circumstances, but because medieval logic actively discouraged cleanliness. Your clothes, covered in layers of suffering. Your cell, thick with the scent of damp regret. And your fellow prisoners, absolutely convinced that medieval soap was a conspiracy. Meanwhile, your rat roommate continues to thrive, probably because he is the only one who understands true survival. Food, if you could call it that. Prison meals consisted mostly of bread, so hard you could use it as a weapon, stale beer, and soups so questionable that even historians struggle to identify the ingredients. If you were really unlucky, you got a bowl of something so vaguely edible that even your rat refused to eat it. If you were rich, you might get better food, but absolutely no one in this dungeon is rich, so good luck with that. Punishments, truly absurd. Sometimes, medieval guards would chain prisoners standing up for days, believing that discomfort was just a normal part of rehabilitation. Some prisoners were forced to carry extremely heavy chains, not because it made sense, but because guards thought walking with unnecessary weight was an excellent method of discipline. Meanwhile, your cell neighbor is still running his imaginary brick business, blissfully unaware that the worst punishments in this dungeon haven't even started yet. And despite all of this madness, somehow, you are adapting, which is deeply concerning, because medieval prison should not feel normal, but somehow it absolutely does. The dungeon is still aggressively committed to being the worst possible place, and somehow you're making it work. Your cell neighbor is now convinced that medieval air is actively plotting against him, claiming that if he breathes incorrectly, the spirits of bad decisions will possess him. You nod. Because honestly, that is no worse than the actual medieval medical advice people used to follow. Speaking of medieval medicine, let's talk about how absolutely ridiculous it was. Feeling sick? Try bleeding. Your body is weak. Let's remove some of your blood and hope for the best. Some medieval healers believed that bad smells could cure illness, leading to actual medical treatments involving placing rotting fish near sick people. If that didn't work, some doctors claimed that wearing specific gemstones could fix all ailments. Because nothing says advanced healthcare like carrying a rock. Meanwhile, your rat continues thriving, probably because it does not trust medieval medicine whatsoever. The dungeon's sense of time is also completely broken. There is no clock, no sun, no reliable way to tell whether it's morning or evening. You judge time by how much food has been thrown at you, by the intensity of prisoner nonsense, and by the sheer level of disappointment in the guard's eyes. By midday, or maybe midnight, who knows anymore, your cell neighbor has declared himself the dungeon's official historian. We need records, he says. Records of what? Records why? He does not elaborate. Meanwhile, another prisoner is attempting to develop a new medieval sport involving spoons, and an ongoing argument about gravity. The guard watches, deeply regretting his entire career path. You watch too, because honestly, you need something to believe in. Another day of medieval nonsense. Another moment of learning more unfortunate historical facts. Another deeply concerning realization that you are adjusting far too well. Because medieval prison never stops evolving. It just changes shape. And somehow, you are right in the middle of it. You have fully accepted that logic will not save you here. Your cell neighbor has now decided that the rat is his spiritual guide, claiming that wherever it moves, fate follows. The rat pauses, looks at him, then steals half of his food and runs away. Fate is clearly not on his side. Meanwhile, across the dungeon, someone is attempting to create medieval stand-up comedy. arguing that if knights get to tell stories of battle, prisoners should get to tell stories of bad decisions. His opening joke: "I came here for the fine dining experience." It turns out they meant eating rats, not with them. You laugh because it is true, not because it is funny. The guard stares for a long moment, debating whether to intervene, then decides it is not worth the effort. The daily food disaster arrives, and it is just as bad as usual, but now with an extra layer of mystery. You examine the bowl carefully. The texture, deeply concerning. The smell, faintly reminiscent of regret. The rat gets to it first, then decides it is not worth stealing. This is worse than usual. You eat it anyway. Because medieval prison does not care about personal preferences. It cares about survival. By midnight, someone has successfully trained their pet cockroach to follow basic commands, which immediately makes him the most powerful man in the dungeon. The cockroach pauses, turns, then refuses to obey. His reign lasts a total of 3 minutes before collapsing. The rat watches, unimpressed, because it knows true dominance cannot be trained. It must be earned. Another night of medieval suffering. Another day of ridiculous decisions. Another deeply concerning realization that history itself is based entirely on nonsense. Because medieval prison never stops surprising you. It just finds new ways to ruin your expectations. And somehow, you wouldn't change a thing. Your cell neighbor is now attempting to teach the rat basic math, arguing that if it learns how to count, it will be able to strategically plan its food thefts more efficiently. The rat pauses, looks at him, then steals his food anyway, without bothering with calculations. Lesson learned: math is optional when you have speed and confidence. Across the way, a prisoner has decided to host medieval talent auditions, claiming that if he finds the most talented prisoner, they can negotiate better living conditions. The first contestant, a man who can whistle in 3 different tones at the same time. The second, someone who claims he can talk to ghosts but will not elaborate. The third, a prisoner who is really good at catching bugs. The guard watches from a distance, squinting like he is deeply considering quitting his job forever. You watch too, because honestly, what else are you going to do? Dinner arrives in its usual fashion, launched into the cell with zero care for human dignity. This time, it lands directly on your foot, soaking into the straw in a way that suggests it is absolutely ruined. The rat examines it carefully, sniffs it once, then walks away in disappointment. This is not a good sign. You eat it anyway, because bad signs mean nothing when starvation is the alternative. By midnight, someone is attempting to hold a medieval courtroom session, arguing that if prisoners organize their own laws, they can negotiate their way out of misery. The case: a prisoner veers the dungeon walls, arguing that they are unnecessarily cruel. The ruling: the walls remain undefeated. The punishment: nothing changes, because medieval justice is an absolute joke. Another day of medieval nonsense. Another night of deeply regrettable choices. Another realization that you are somehow not just surviving. You are thriving. Because medieval prison isn't just bad. It's practically its own civilization now. And somehow, you are fully part of it. The dungeon never promises stability, and today, it is particularly committed to unexpected nonsense. A soldier arrives, stepping into the dim corridor with the kind of authority that suggests he is here for a reason, but absolutely will not tell you what that reason is. Your cell neighbor stops mid-argument with the rat, glancing at the soldier like he is witnessing a rare cosmic event. The soldier pauses in front of your cell, stares for a long moment, then sighs like he already regrets whatever task has been assigned to him. "You," he says, pointing directly at you. Great. Fantastic. Something is happening, and given your history, it will absolutely not be good. The guard unlocks the door, gestures for you to stand, and does not explain further. You step out cautiously, because medieval orders do not come with explanations. They come with consequences. Your cell neighbor watches, wide-eyed, clearly invested in your fate. "Tell the rat I said goodbye," you mutter. The rat does not react, because the rat has already moved on emotionally. You are led down the corridor, past cells filled with prisoners who absolutely know you are walking into disaster. The soldier walks with purpose, leading you toward a door that does not lead back to the outside, but deeper into the prison. Where? Why? You do not ask, because asking will not make it better. The soldier pushes the heavy wooden door open, revealing a room filled with exactly what you feared. Medieval officials with deeply untrustworthy expressions. The robed man from before is here. He smiles faintly, the kind of smile that suggests he knows something you absolutely do not. "You're back," he says, like this is some kind of reunion. You are back, but in a way that absolutely does not feel comforting. He gestures toward a chair, a rare object in the dungeon, meaning it absolutely exists only to make you uncomfortable. "Sit." You sit. And somehow, this is worse than the dungeon. The robed man leans forward slightly, studying you like you are a puzzle he enjoys solving. You do not enjoy this. The soldier stands near the door, arms crossed, clearly here to ensure you do not suddenly choose to leave. You glance at the medieval officials, men who look like they have made a lifetime career out of ruining other people's days. One of them, older, wearing too many layers of unnecessary fabric, clears his throat. "You have returned under suspicion," he says. "Suspicion of what? Suspicion why?" You do not ask, because asking will not help you. The robed man gestures vaguely toward the others, as if inviting them to expand on this nonsense. "You failed in your assigned task," one of them announces. Your assigned task. You were thrown into a job with no training, expected to magically understand it, then pulled back into the dungeon without warning. You say none of this, because medieval consequences do not favor explanations. They favor unfortunate outcomes. You will be given another chance. The robed man says, smiling like this is somehow good news. You are quite certain it is not. Another chance to what? Another chance why? One of the officials adjusts his sleeves. A deeply unnecessary movement that seems to serve no purpose, except to make you increasingly uncomfortable. What cannot allow prisoners to remain useless, he continues. The soldier shifts slightly, probably waiting for the exact moment he needs to grab you again. You glance at the robed man, hoping for some kind of explanation. He simply smiles again. You start tomorrow. You sigh. The dungeon never lets you rest, but today, it has decided to throw you straight into another medieval disaster. You wake up to the sound of the guards, preparing something outside your cell, voices low, movements quick, which is never a good sign. Your cell neighbor is already awake, watching like he is witnessing the beginning of the worst chapter of your life. The soldier arrives. The door swings open, and before you can object, resist, or even blink, you are already being dragged forward. Your cell neighbor salutes you, as if you are about to embark on a journey nobody returns from. The rat does not react, because the rat knows better than to care. The soldier leads you out, past the corridors, past the other prisoners, some watching in amusement, some watching in pity. You do not ask where you are going, because asking questions in medieval settings only leads to deeper confusion. The door at the end of the hall opens, revealing the robed man once again. standing there like a man who enjoys giving people false hope. "You're ready," he says. "This is a lie. You are not ready." But medieval survival does not wait for readiness. It just happens. They hand you a task, again, without instructions, without context, without any concern for whether you are remotely qualified to do it. And you already know you are going to fail spectacularly, which means things are about to get much, much worse. The medieval task you have been forced into is already doomed, because you have received no training, no instructions, and absolutely no reasonable chance of success. The robed man stands there, arms crossed, watching like he is fully aware that you are about to fail spectacularly. The soldier remains near the door, clearly prepared to drag you back the moment this inevitably goes wrong. Meanwhile, your cell neighbor is probably enjoying whatever absurd rumor is spreading about your fate back in the dungeon. You look at the tools in front of you. You do not recognize them. You do not know what they are for. You do not know what you are supposed to do. And yet, medieval logic insists that you begin immediately. The robed man smiles faintly, gesturing toward the mess of supplies. "You'll figure it out," he says, fully believing this statement, despite all evidence to the contrary. You pick up the nearest object, gripping it like you have any idea what you are doing. You absolutely do not. The robed man watches in amusement. The officials watch in expectation. The soldier watches, already prepared for your inevitable removal. You take a breath. You begin. And immediately, everything goes wrong. Whatever task you were supposed to do, you did not do it correctly. The tools were not meant to be used this way. The result? An immediate disaster that absolutely should not have happened. The robed man chuckles lightly, shaking his head like he was hoping you would fail, just for the entertainment value. The soldier moves forward. "You're done," he says. And just like that, you are being dragged back toward the dungeon, back into the familiar misery, back into the cold air, back into the damp scent of regret. And somehow, this is still worse than before. Your cell neighbor is already waiting, leaning casually against the wall, like he knew all along that you would return. He nods slowly, like he is welcoming you back to a life you foolishly thought you could escape. The rat does not react, because the rat never expected you to succeed. And now, you are right back where you started. Medieval survival is not about winning. It is about enduring the inevitable failure. And somehow, you are really, really good at that. The dungeon has taken everything from you. Hope, dignity, logic. But somehow, it has given you something in return. Not freedom, not respect, but an understanding. An understanding that medieval survival is not about justice. It is about embracing inevitable nonsense. And now, you are fully part of that nonsense. Your cell neighbor watches you with amusement, shaking his head like he knew all along that your escape attempt would collapse before it even began. The rat does not acknowledge your suffering, because it has already moved on emotionally. You sit back against the wall, feeling the full weight of failure settle in, and yet, there is no anger, no frustration, no resistance, just acceptance. Because medieval fate does not reward struggle. It only rewards those who endure. And endure, you have. The dungeon is louder than usual tonight, filled with arguments, bad decisions, unnecessary declarations of power, and a man attempting to train cockroaches for military service. You watch in silence, feeling the absurdity settle over you like a heavy medieval cloak. And somehow, this is home now, not by choice, not by desire, but by sheer, unavoidable reality. Tomorrow, something will happen. Something worse, something unexpected, something so deeply unreasonable that even the rat will be confused. Because medieval survival never stops surprising you. It just finds new ways to humiliate expectations. And somehow, you are ready, understanding that logic is a distant dream, that medieval survival is about resilience, not reason, and that, somehow, you are no longer just enduring the nonsense. You are thriving in it. Your cell neighbor smirks, nodding like he knows you have fully accepted your fate. The rat still refuses to acknowledge your journey, because it has known all along that resistance is pointless. And the guards, they sigh, they shake their heads, and they continue walking. Because whatever bizarre chaos you and the other prisoners create, they have long since given up trying to stop it. Tomorrow, everything will happen again. The nonsense, the medieval logic, the bad decisions disguised as survival tactics. It will never make sense. And somehow, that's okay. Because medieval life doesn't need to be reasonable. It just needs to be survived. And tonight, you can rest knowing you have survived one more day in the madness. Now, sleep comfortably. Not in a dungeon. Not surrounded by rats and historical suffering. Just in your own bed, knowing that medieval chaos stays firmly in the past. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the nonsense drift away. Because whatever happens tomorrow, it will not involve medieval bread so hard you could use it as a weapon. And that, honestly, is a victory. Rest well. Sleep peacefully. The nonsense ends here. Good night.